Quit barking. Quit barking. Shush. So this is a simple project. I'm not even sure it's worth a video, but there's some parts of it that might be interesting to some folks. It's a router tabletop. There's a base to it, but you can put it on any base you want. You may have seen from some of my previous videos that I had a Rockler router tabletop. It came with the Rockler Pro Lift, which I really like the lift, but the table was just, it just didn't work for me. It had a rail in the middle, pieces kept getting caught in it. It wasn't very big, it wasn't very stable. And I've got a lot of furniture projects I want to get to, but I'm taking some time to try and catch up on some shop projects. I've got some wiring to do, some lighting. So anyway, this was the first item up in terms of getting organized. And I'll tell you how I made it, and if you learn something or you're making a router tabletop yourself, it's pretty easy to make.
So the first step is to cut up some plywood. In this case, I used Baltic Birch. Others would use MDF. These are 36 by 27 sheets. From there, I use some super sticky pattern tape to tape the jig I made, or the template I made in the prior video, to the plywood so I can route out a recess for the router lift. When it's taped down good, I use a washer to make a line equidistant from the inside of the template, just so I know where I need to clean out for a lip for the router lift to rest. Two of the corners have mounting areas where the screw needs to be, so I'm leaving room for those. There's also areas where leveler feet have to go, so the lift can be leveled to the table. And I've marked out where I want to go ahead and cut out material. So here I'm marking each of the areas I need to be sure and cut out with the router. Got to see how deep to set the bit. In this case, it's 0.403 inches. With all the areas marked for cutting out and the template in place, I can go ahead and route out along the template first. Once the first pass of the template is done, I can go ahead and remove it as the rest doesn't touch the outer edge. Now it's just a matter of freehand routing out the rest of those areas I previously marked. The bulk of the interior can be cut free with the jigsaw. Before cutting the second piece, I want to make sure the router fits, and the router lift fits just right. Since I'm happy with the fit, I'll go ahead and mark the cutout on the second sheet of Baltic Birch plywood. And this is just a simple jigsaw chore to cut out the waste, and I've started with a Forstner bit to give me an entry hole. With each piece cut out, I've got to glue them together. So I'll go ahead and slather on a good bit of glue in between the two and get them all clamped up. And use as many clamps as I can lay my hands on. Yeah, that's a lot of clamps. When it's dry, I true up the front edge. That's the edge I'll be encountering most. The sides I'm not terribly concerned about. Router lift goes back in to mark the mounting holes for the nut inserts. And this lift uses a 5/16 inch threaded nutsert, and I measured the outside of the nutsert to figure out what size hole to drill, and then I'll thread them in with an Allen key. With the table upside down, I will start and drive in the router lift leveling feet. And I'll try and find a link to these so you can see where you can get them. And I did pre-drill these holes. With all the leveling feet in, the lift goes back in, top is right side up, and I'm simply screwing in each foot until the router lift is perfectly level. Time to make the fence. Started by ripping out some more Baltic Birch so that I'll laminate a fence up. So I've got 2 long pieces of Baltic Birch and some scrap 1/4 inch poplar ply. You'll see the poplar ply in the middle will create a gap, and that gap will be where the 2 F-style clamps go to use to affix the fence. It's a pretty simple mechanism. I won't take credit for it. I saw Mike Farrington use this, and I said, that's really simple and it works. So this is my way of doing it. Aside from looking like I have stock in the glue company in this shot, it's fairly straightforward. So you can see we have the complete sandwich here at this point between the Baltic Birch, the 1/4 inch plywood, and the other Baltic Birch. And note that the top piece leaves a rabbet, which is where the base will go. And again, I get out all the clamps because, why not? They're already out. I've got a dust collection port also from Rockler that I'm going to mount, and I've got to go ahead and make the cutout on the base and the fence before I glue them together. Otherwise, it'll be awkward to do after it's all glued up. So here I'm just going to mark where that cutout needs to be. With the area marked, I went ahead and indicated where I wanted to remove material. So the outer line is the vacuum attachment. The inner line is where I want to make the hole. So I've marked the fence and I've marked the back. And when they go together, you should see it should make a good passageway. I'll get started with a Forstner bit that's the same radius that I drew out. That'll make it easy to cut out the area in this really thick fence. And cutting out the rest of the waste is nothing fancy, just a dovetail saw on the workbench, cut it down on both sides. Not shown here is that center piece, which you might think, how am I going to cut that out? I just used a chisel, much like cleaning the waste out of a dovetail. With the waste cut out and the router tabletop basically functional at this point, but not finished, went ahead and put in a round over bit to round over the entry point. And that's so if I'm routing anything, I really don't want a sharp edge there that might catch, even though the fence is perfectly flat. It doesn't help to give a rounded entry into pieces that might be going across the opening. Okay, so the fence really needs to be square. So my way of getting there is what you see here. I've got the base clamped to the table saw, which is flat, and I have the fence clamped to the base. Now I'm periodically measuring square. This is after I've glued it up, mind you. I'm periodically measuring square as I apply different clamps and giving a little bit of adjustment. Once I'm really happy, I lock down all of the pieces square to the table saw so that it can't move. Check square again and make sure that it's absolutely square. You know, not that a little bit won't hurt it, and you can actually run it through the joiner when you're done to get it truly flat. But it really helps to start with a perfectly square fence and base. The fence and table got 3 coats of polyurethane. I absolutely hate polyurethane. I've got some, so I'll just use it for shop furniture. And I won't show you all 3 coats. Once the finish was dry, the top was put back on the table and attached with screws all around. And the router lift can go in for the last time and install the bolts that go into the nutserts, as well as a final tweaking of the leveling screws. And you see the slot left on the fence. The F-clamp fits perfectly in there, and you'll note I cut the height of the fence so that the height of the fence plus the thickness of the table would just fit in that standard size clamp. I screwed on the dust port. Now to make the adjustable fence face, which is optional, I milled up some clear cherry from some scraps I had, and here I have run a couple of passes through on the table saw to get a 5/16 inch groove. Once you've got your groove, that will let the base of a T-slotting bit pass through. And so now I'm going ahead and cutting the T-slot portion of it on the router tabletop that we've made. And one thing I like to point out here, I really like the height of the fence because you can clamp a featherboard on it or anything else you want in terms of jigging or just general flexibility. So attaching those sliding fences onto the stationary fence requires some hardware. I got some 5/16 T-nuts and some twist knobs. Got to drill some holes into the non-movable fence, and use a little square to keep me honest. So the T-nuts go in, the twist knob goes on the back, and then you can slide the movable fence face onto the T-nuts and adjust it so you can control the size of the opening.
So features of this one are it's adjustable with just F-style clamps, so you can move it around. Big flat work surface. It's made out of 2 sheets of Baltic Birch plywood. And one of the things that I like in a router table is adjustable fence faces. The fence itself is Baltic Birch plywood. The faces are any scrap hardwood you want. I happen to have just tons of cherry, so they're held on by T-nuts. T-nuts cut into your board. So these are sacrificial. They'll get used up. When I'm doing it, they'll get chewed up at the end, and I'll just make a clean cut and use it. And then eventually they'll get short, so then you just replace them. Works really well. I'm pretty happy with it. It's got a dust port in the back, which is a Rockler part, which I'll try and put in the description. It started really as a 3D printing to make templates project because I needed a template to cut out for the router lift. Anyway, here's how it's made, and if you're making one, I wish you luck.